The youngest new face in the U.S. Senate next year will be that of Democrat Joseph Biden of Delaware. So young, in fact, that at the time of his election on November 7th, Biden was not yet old enough to serve. Yesterday, that problem was resolved. ABC Capitol Hill correspondent Bob Clark has the story.
They gave a surprise party yesterday for Joe Biden, who will make history because of his age when he takes his seat in the new Senate. The boyish-looking father of 3 young children was celebrating his 30th birthday. That makes him just old enough to be a United States Senator, 30 being the minimum age prescribed by the Constitution. Biden, a liberal Democrat, pulled one of the big upsets of the election by unseating a 63-year-old Republican, Caleb Boggs. In Washington today, he was having trouble convincing some people he really is a senator and having some doubts about the Senate seniority system, while hoping older members won't hold his age against him.
I expect these fellows are going to eventually judge me on my merit, not on my age, and I have to establish that merit, assuming there is any there. I don't think it's going to be much of a problem. Beyond having other senators' staffs think I'm applying for a job or as a page or something.
Would you like to see some changes in the seniority system?
Well, I would like to see some changes in the seniority system, but, and it's not going to make any difference my saying this, but it's not because I'm 30 and coming in. I think that the seniority system has many more drawbacks and it has merits. Where I'm not going to lead any move to change that in my formative years in the Senate, but were there to be such a vote to come up, I clearly would vote to eliminate the seniority system.
The indications are that you may be 100th in seniority, the last man on the totem pole in the Senate. Does that bother you?
Well, no, it doesn't. As a matter of fact, I think it's sort of amusing that I probably have the least seniority of anyone ever to enter this august body.
Biden worked in a borrowed office today, holding interviews, sorting through 1,400 job applications from people who want to work on his Senate staff. If he stays in the Senate till the end of this century, he'll be 57, the average age of senators now.
By the way,
Bob Clark, ABC News, Washington.
Democratic presidential candidate Joseph Biden today faces a controversy. 3 weeks ago at a debate at the Iowa State Fair, he used phrases identical to those delivered by British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock.
Biden seemed to be claiming Kinnock's vision and life as his own.
Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college?
Why is Gladys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
My ancestors who worked in the coal mines in northeast Pennsylvania don't come up after 12 hours and play football.
8 hours underground and then come up and play football.
It's because they didn't have a platform upon which to stand.
There was no platform upon which they could stand.
The notion that every thought or notion or idea you'd have to go back and find and attribute to someone, I think is, quite frankly, ludicrous. I should have said, to paraphrase Neil Kinnock, it's the only time I didn't, and all the times I've ever used it.
But CBS News found a tape of a second instance.
It reappeared in the New York Times with a new charge, that Biden had appropriated a famous litany from the late Robert Kennedy about what the gross national product cannot measure.
It cannot measure the health of our children,
The health of our children,
the quality of our education,
the quality of their education,
the joy of their play,
or the joy of their play.
Biden gave Kennedy no credit. He has also quoted or paraphrased John Kennedy, Hubert Humphrey, and British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock, all without credit.
Senator Joseph Biden may have more explaining to do. The new questions stem from taped remarks of Biden during an April campaign appearance in New Hampshire.
I went to law school on a full academic scholarship, the only one in my class to have a full academic scholarship. Went back to law school and in fact ended up in the top half of my class. I was the outstanding student in the political science department at the end of my year. I graduated with 3 degrees from undergraduate school and 165 credits, only needed 123 credits.
Biden now concedes he did not graduate in the top half of his law school class, that he does not have 3 degrees from college, and that he was not named outstanding political science student in college.
Newsweek says Biden actually went to school on a half scholarship, ended up near the bottom of his class,
and won only 1 degree, not 3.
Joe Biden ranked 76th in a class of 85 at the University of Syracuse Law School. I mean, this guy comes off this whole thing as a flyweight.
Now Biden says Newsweek is right. His memory had failed him.
And I'd be delighted to sit down and compare my IQ to yours if you'd like, Frank. Joe Biden. When I marched in the Civil Rights Movement, I did not march with a 12-point program. I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitudes. And we changed attitudes. When I was 17 years old, like many of you, I participated in sit-ins to desegregate the restaurants and movie houses of Wilmington, Delaware. I came out of the Civil Rights Movement. I was one of those guys that sat in and marched and all that stuff. During the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the Civil Rights Movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. I was a suburbanite kid who got a dose of exposure to what was happening to black Americans when I'm in my own city.
You know, when I was a teenager in Delaware, for real, I got involved in the Civil Rights Movement. We have the 8th largest black population in America. Most people don't know that. And I'd go to 8 o'clock Mass, then I'd go to Reverend Herring's church where we'd meet in order to organize and figure where we were going to go, whether we were going to desegregate the Rialto movie theater or what we were going to do. I got my education for real in the black church. And that's not hyperbole, it's a fact. But I got my education, Reverend Doc, in the black church. Not a joke. Because when we used to get organized on Sundays to go out and desegregate movie theaters and things like that, we'd do it through the black church. I was no big shakes, Reverend, in the Civil Rights Movement. I was just a kid. I got involved in desegregating movie theaters and helping, you may remember Reverend Moyer in Delaware and Herman Holloway organized voter registration drives, coming out of black churches on Sunday, figuring how we were going to move. In October, I was invited to the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis to receive the Freedom Award, a thing when I sat in black churches in the east side of Wilmington getting ready to, and by the way, next to two Jewish rabbis, getting ready to go out and desegregate movie theaters in Delaware. I never, ever thought in my life I would be worthy of, and I'm still not sure I'm worthy of it.
So Joe Biden has been basically lying about something that happened to him in South Africa. It didn't actually happen. His campaign has now admitted that. The debate moderators did not ask him about this at the debate last night, but finally his campaign has had to fess up. Here is what he's been saying, though.
I spent my whole life fighting for civil rights, voting rights, social justice, economic justice. And that's what I'll do when I'm your president. This day, 30 years ago, Nelson Mandela walked out of prison and entered into discussions about apartheid. I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto trying to get to see him on Robbins Island. When he came to the United States, when he came to the White House, to the Senate, I was chairman of the committee, and he walked in, and most incredible thing I've ever felt in my life. He walked across in that private room with the big table we have in the executive room, and he walked over, and I said, Mr. President, he leaned, I said, thank you. Thank you for trying to come and see me.
Yikes. Because I don't think that actually happened. I will give you more details.
I mean, if that happened, that's pretty amazing.
I don't know how Mandela could have seen this, but let's hear out the Biden campaign and their excuse on why Biden has been saying this story. So Joe Biden's 2020 campaign has admitted the former vice president was not arrested for trying to visit Nelson Mandela at a South African prison during apartheid after the Democratic candidate used the claim at least 3 times during appearances in recent weeks. In campaign visits to Nevada and South Carolina, Mr. Biden claimed he was arrested with the US ambassador to the United Nations in Soweto, despite there being no publicly available evidence of the incident. It is also unclear why Mr. Biden would have been arrested in Soweto for trying to visit Mandela, as the city is hundreds of miles away from the island where the anti-apartheid activist was imprisoned. He took a trip with a congressional delegation in the 70s. This is their excuse. He was separated from the Congressional Black Caucus members he was traveling with at the airport when he landed. Kate Bedingfield, Mr. Biden's communications director, told reporters on Wednesday. When making that remark, he was talking about his long record fighting apartheid. He was one of the leading voices in the United States Senate in the 80s. However, Ms. Bedingfield could not justify Mr. Biden's use of the word arrest or a coda he added to the story in which Mandela personally thanked him over the incident. And that seems very unlikely that Mandela thanked him for trying to visit him when that never actually happened.
I don't envy the job of these communications directors where they have to be like,
the next president of the United States, Joe Biden.
It's June 9th, 1987, and then Senator Joseph R. Biden Jr. has just entered the presidential race. Look familiar? The 2020 race is Biden's 3rd attempt at the Oval Office. He first ran for president 32 years ago. For those who may have forgotten or weren't around in '87, here's what happened. Biden started off as a strong contender.
Senator Joseph R. Biden Jr. of Delaware.
But his campaign was marred by some early blunders, like this one.
What law school did you attend, and where did you place in that class? And the other question is...
I think I probably have a much higher IQ than you do, I suspect.
And he exaggerated his academic record in law school.
Went back to law school, and in fact ended up in the top half of my class.
And then there were moments like this, repeated later during the campaign.
When I marched in the civil rights movement, I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitudes.
But he never actually marched in the civil rights movement at all. Ultimately, it was accusations of plagiarism in his speeches.
I did not know that was a Robert Kennedy quote. My mistake.
That forced him to drop out of the race.
I made some mistakes.
After that, Biden stayed in the Senate, ran again in the 2008 race, became the vice presidential nominee, and then the vice president. Laid low for a little while, and now we're here.
If I'm going to be able to beat Donald Trump in 2020, it's going to happen here.
And certain things, including a handful of Biden's vulnerabilities, haven't changed. He's still leaning into some of the core messages he highlighted during his first presidential run, often emphasizing his profile over policy, promising to put the country on the right path after what he sees as the ills of Republican administrations. Here he is in 1987.
I tell you today that America is a nation at risk.
In 2007.
This president's going to be judged and his administration judged very harshly by history.
And in 2019.
We're in the battle for the soul of this nation.
But Biden has struggled to project himself as a man in step with the times, and parts of his political history continue to haunt him, like his role in the questioning of Anita Hill in 1991.
It is appropriate to ask Professor Hill anything any member wishes to ask her to plumb the depths of her credibility.
And more recently, it was his relationship with personal space.
The boundaries of protecting personal space have been reset, and I get it.
Throughout his more than 4-decade-long career in politics, Biden has become known for his freewheeling charm and authenticity.
I've been referred to as middle-class Joe. It's not always meant as a compliment.
But his candor has also gotten him into some trouble.
I've done some dumb things, and I'll do dumb things again.
As the Democratic frontrunner, Biden will be under a microscope. The question is whether he can harness the folksy appeal he's become known for without